Hello everyone and welcome along to Racing Weekly, a podcast and YouTube show brought to you by oddschecker in association with Bet365. As always, my old pal Steve Ryder on my left, looking forward to hearing what he's got to say about the racing coming up this weekend and what we've seen recently. But a particularly warm welcome to one of the rising stars of racing broadcasting world. It's Tom Bull, Racing TV colleague. Tom, first of all, just tell me, how have you found your introduction into the job that you now have?
Yeah, it's been great. A very warm welcome from all my Racing TV colleagues, really, including yourself. At one stage, you're my mentor, so thank you very much for that.
Has that ended?
I don't know, actually. Is it still going? I haven't heard from you for a few years, so...
Wow.
But no, it's been great. Really enjoyable. I always say that it's the best job in the world, isn't it? Working in racing, doing something you love, getting to talk about horses all day long, and getting paid for it. I mean, it's not much better than that, is it? But no, it's been a sort of 3-year stint now I've done at Racing TV. 2 years, I would say, presenting, and long may it continue. How
did you get into it, and were the family into racing?
Yeah, I mean,
where it started?
Yeah, Dad's always loved it. My godfather bred horses, so there were a couple of people on that side who were interested in it, but no one's ever worked in it, so that was a kind of new thing for the family. Yeah, Dad loves watching me on Racing TV now. I think he's pretty pleased that I'm in the game. He's a little bit older now, so he's retired, but he gets to switch it on the evenings and see me and see you as well.
Well, it's tough times, but he'll get through it. Steve, you're a regular now. You're an established broadcaster. And the tipping, when I last left you, admittedly a few weeks ago, you were flying along. How are things going since then?
Less good. I mean, yesterday kind of summed it up, my recent form, which has taken a little slight dip, would be the fact that I tipped a George Bowie handicap debutant in a nursery that was back from 2-1 into 10-11 and got beaten by a 66-1 shot from £13 out the handicap. So that pretty much sums it up. And they pulled about 5-6 lengths clear of the third. But we're all right. This weekend, I've got loads of winners.
Oh, excellent, excellent. And the summer of racing that we've had so far, we're at now the change of seasons. The Ledger's around the corner, Irish Champions Weekend. We're looking to the Champions Day at Ascot, and then obviously the Arc as well, Breeders' Cup, all that sort of stuff. How good has this racing summer been?
I've really enjoyed it. I've always said on this show that when you test the 3-year-old form against the elders is my favourite part of the season, the likes of the Sussex Stakes and the Juddmonte. I thought we had a real top-class Juddmonte, and City of Troy has kind of been the poster boy. It looked like it might all go wrong at one stage with the Guineas, but yeah, I'm really intrigued to see what he's going to do in the Breeders' Cup.
Do you agree that it's been a above-average flat season?
I think it probably has, yes. Possibly not in the 2-year-olds camp, I would say, so far, but City of Troy has really lifted the season for me. I thought York was wonderful. I mean, I always loved the meeting, but that was one of the best races and most enjoyable experiences watching a race I've had, I'd say, for the last 2 or 3 years. I thought it was just a mesmeric performance, partly because I think the second horse, Calandagan, is a proper unit. Like, I think he's a serious horse, and the way that he won it, Ryan Moore doing it from the front, it didn't get much better than that. And I think it's so exciting to have a horse who I think, for once, genuinely has a very good chance of handling the dirt in America.
What makes you say that?
Pedigree, really, and the fact that I think he's got the right running style for it. He likes to go off, got that high cruising speed. He can slot in, he can go forward, doesn't really matter. He's quite adaptable and versatile in terms of where he wants to be in the race. And the other thing about the Breeders' Cup Classic, at the moment, doesn't look very strong this year. It's mostly 3-year-olds, and they're all kind of beating each other, a lot of collateral form. So if there is going to be a horse that could win it, I think it is City of Troy. He's got the perfect year for it.
Okay. Interesting chat about the 2-year-olds, because obviously you're hoping that at this point the 2-year-olds spark into even more life than we've seen so far and sets us up for a big autumn. All right. At least we've both teased lots to come in the show, both in terms of selections and 1 or 2 other talking points. So let's have a look at Racing Recap. And we will start with the 2-year-olds from Sandown and the Solario Stakes. And Tom, it's a race that John Gosden has won 7 times, obviously, now John and Thady Gosden. And Field of Gold beat Matulri Bay. I think there was quite a lot of expectation for Field of Gold. Did he deliver as much as you would have wanted?
Yeah, he was pretty impressive. Yeah, I like what he did. I thought he was extremely visually taking at Newmarket. And he came to Sandown with a big reputation. As you say, the Gosden has got such a good record in that race with some very smart 2-year-olds in the past. I'm not sure he's quite in the camp of the Kingman, Too Darn Hot, who have won that race before. I think he did it well. I like the way he cruised into it. I was a little bit disappointed by the way that Matari Bay got so close to him at the line, having not got a clear run. I actually am sort of in the camp of thinking that perhaps he would have won with a clear run. And his final furlong sectional, not that I'm really a figures man, but I'm starting to become one, was very impressive. Was the fastest final furlong of all the horses in the race. And he also had the fastest finishing speed. So as far as that's concerned, for me, the horse to take out of it is actually the second. That said, Field of Gold apparently is very much a horse who's going to improve as a 3-year-old physically. So I think you've got to keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's a good combination of discussion. I think he's right about Field of Gold, perhaps even better with more time. But I thought the second deserved a lot of credit. Would be how you read it?
Yeah, and the race didn't go particularly for him. He was bumped out the stalls. You need to remember as well, Field of Gold was beaten on his debut, so he had the benefit of one extra run before coming into this, was then against the rail and kind of had to wait until Field of Gold made his challenge before he could then pull out to go round him. I think Maturi Bay will be better on softer ground. He's got quite a knee action on him in comparison to Field of Gold, who by Kingman you'd expect fast ground to obviously then suit. But I love the performance of the winner. I'm slightly against Tom here. Like, I'm a sucker for a good-looking grey. That's why I loved having Sam Turner back on last week. But colouring apart, yeah, I really like this. I just thought he settled well. I thought Kieran Schumacher did really well on him to get a bit of cover, which they were kind of going 2 by 2. And then as soon as he pulled out, he showed a really good turn of foot. Yeah. And then I just think he was probably idling, still a bit green at the finish. But yeah, looking at the Dewhurst, like there's talks of the Lagardère later on in the season, but I know the French ground, like we've had a couple of good ground arcs, haven't we, recently, as opposed to the soft ground arcs. But you'd slightly worry if it turned up soft on that day. But for the Dewhurst, he's 6-1 with Bet365. And I thought that was perfectly fair enough with the Lion and Winter. Obviously heading to this sales race, Henri Matisse, Ancient Truth. I'd put him right up there as a Group 1 performer.
All right, he's 14-1 with Bet365 for the 2,000 guineas next year, Field of Gold. I'm just trying to find Matari Bay. If he's in, I can't even find him on this list. Lion and Winter, obviously, is 8-1 favourite, Henri Matisse. And I can't discover poor Matari Bay. He's not even, I can't find him on this list.
Well, he might be there when he wins the Royal Lodge.
Yeah. But I think both horses are exciting. As you mentioned, John Gosden's won it with some good horses in the past. You mentioned Kingman, Too Darn Hot, Ravens Pass. So hopefully Field of Gold goes forward. Are we going to keep quiet now on the Kieran Schumacher thing? Because I think he's sort of settled in, isn't he, really?
I mean,
or is it a talking point anymore?
I've always been a massive fan.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is it a talking point?
No.
Good. I'm glad. It still comes up every time he rides a winner for them, almost on television.
Until he rides that Group 1 winner for them, like it's gonna.
But what happens when
coming.
he does ride that Group 1 winner? It'd be like, oh, it's been tough and all that.
It's taken him so long to get there.
Oh my gosh, it's.
Don't worry, you'll only have to wait for the Dewhurst.
Wow. Okay. It will be. I think it might be Juddmonte colours, but it won't be. Okay, let's move on and talk about the Atalanta Stakes, won by Tamfana. Clearly, she probably would have won the Guineas, all things being equal, and pretty impressive. Just what you expected.
This is one of these races where as soon as they cross the line, you kick yourself. Because I took her on because I thought, I don't know, I had a slight question mark with her dropping back down in trip, but she showed loads of pace. Like if you look back at the Guineas, she looked like a stayer, didn't she? Over that mile trip. She then stepped up to 10 furlongs in the French Oaks where she ran well, didn't get the mile and a half on her next start, but I thought she settled well, she showed a good turn of foot, and I think she's really exciting going forward. They've obviously got the option of the Sun Chariot Stakes or 10 furlongs in the Opera. I don't think either would inconvenience her, and I was really impressed having them watch the race trying to take her on. I thought the second Doha ran well. I think she needs to step back up in trip, which is no surprise given her breeding, See the Stars out of Trev. And then actually the third and fourth I thought were worth taking out of it as well. Imperial Quarter, they dropped in trip to a mile, but she was still mad keen in the early stages. And then the fourth as well, Spiritual, kind of proved that her run at Sandown and victory over Indelible was no fluke. So I think if she gets an easy lead again in a similar sort of contest, she could well be up to winning at this level as well.
Yeah, I like the third Imperial Quarter. The down ambivalent was awkward, to say the least. Yeah, and she's got similar traits, but she's also got a lot of class. I think she's got better as the season's gone on, so I'll be keen on her. What was your take on the Atalanta?
I thought Tanfana was extremely impressive. I mean, it was such a comfortable win, wasn't it? I mean, she'd been called the winner the entire way through, particularly in sort of 2 furlongs to go. She was going much the best, and she put the race to bed in very taking fashion. I'm with you. I think she would have won the Guineas. I'm starting to think Miles probably her best trip. She's been tried over a lot further now, hasn't she? But nothing really went right for her in soft ground. I think she wants a faster surface. But I think she's definitely one for Group 1. I think there will be a Group 1 to go her way. Probably over a mile. Yeah. I mean, I think she's been possibly unlucky not to get one so far, but there's no doubt in my mind that she's a Group 1 filly. What always sticks in my mind as well is that David Menuisier has always said that she's the best filly he's ever trained by quite some margin, which is actually quite a fillip because, of course, you had the likes of Wonderful Tonight, who was successful at the top level in the past, and he's always made no kind of secret about how the regard in which he holds her. So, yeah, I think she will get that Group 1. I think she's got a massive chance if it's sound ground, fast ground in the Sun Chariot to win there.
Well, just to give you the latest betting with Bet365 for the Sun Chariot, Porta Fortuna, who is just rock solid and so admirable, is a 2-1 favourite at the moment. Inspiral is 7-2, Opera Singer 5-1, Tanfana 5-1, and then it's 10-1 bar those. But if those 4, or at least 3 of those 4 turn up for the race, it could be an absolute cracker, the Sun Chariot. But as you mentioned, she's also got the options of the Opera and then the QE2 later on in the season. Let's go to Beverley, talk about the Beverley Bullet, which was the big race there on Saturday. Democracy Dilemma just holding on from Al Bashir. Emiratiana was only just a fraction behind as well. It was a smart performance. I think that the noteworthy thing was the fact that Tom Eves had ridden a winner for Robert Cowell for he's ridden lots of winners this year, but for Robert Cowell, it's been, I think, 3 years since he last rode for him.
You know, it was a good performance from Democracy Dilemma. I mean, before the race, it's one of those contests, wasn't it? You look at all these collateral form figures amongst these sprinters who've been plying their trade at either handicap level or kind of listed class, and you think they're all capable of beating each other. I can't possibly pick a horse in this race. In the end, I went on Al Bashir because it came down on Al Bashir at least because of the kind of dropping back to 5 furlongs angle. Yeah, the race didn't really pan out that favourably for him. It was quite interesting at Beverley because you got that changing camera angle, and with about a furlong and a half to go, Al Bashir and the rest of the group were a mile off Democracy Dilemma because there was a big segregation between the 2 groups, and obviously he was only beaten very narrowly in the end. I spoke to Holly Doyle the night before at Salisbury on Friday, and she said he's got his own mind about things. You know, it just depends what side of bed he wakes up on. And I know how that feels, that's for sure. But in the end, I think he did wake up on the right side of bed, and he was just a bit unlucky.
He was a little bit. He was flashing home. What was your take on that race?
I thought Al Bashir, he mixes it between 5 and 6 furlongs, doesn't he? I always felt like 5 furlongs at Ascot suits him well, a nice stiff finish, and I thought Beverley might just be a slightly too fast for him, which it just ended up being. Democracy Dilemma, I just couldn't believe his SP of 8-1. He just drifted throughout the whole day. I thought this race would be kind of perfect for him, but didn't back him, obviously, at the prices earlier on in the day because I thought he was slightly too short. I thought the 5 furlongs at Goodwood earlier this season would be perfect for him, and he got upset in the stalls that day. I thought that was kind of the race for him. Ran over York over 5.5 furlongs, and he's just a proper 5 furlong. If they did 4 furlong sprints, he'd be right up there because he's so fast out the gates and so quick at the lead. Yeah, Tom Eves riding for Robert Cowell for the first time since 2021. He's the go-to jockey for this race. This is now his 4th win in the race. It was the last with Tangerine Trees in 2011. So, yeah, trainers, take note next year. Tom Eves is your man.
One race that I thought was enjoyable to watch was the Chester Stakes. I actually quite fancied Keys Chorister for the race. I thought she had a lovely trip round. She had every chance, but she was put in her place by Absurd, who I thought got a lovely ride from Danny Tudhope.
Yeah, I did just have to check that Enemy was still in training and hadn't switched to Willie Mullins because Kieran Fallon...
Yeah, that's a good point.
Danny Tudhope had tracked through. Keys Chorister was in the perfect position, and then coming into the straight, pulls out as you normally do at Chester because the leader is obviously going to stick to the rail, and then Kieran Fallon just edged off and left the golden passage up the inside for Danny Tudhope. Yeah, James Doyle will feel slightly annoyed, I think, on Keys Chorister because if he knew that would have happened, he'd had the charm run up the inside. I thought it was okay as a performance. I wouldn't be in a rush to take the 25-1 that's available with Bet365 for the Melbourne Cup. But yeah, it was just kind of tactics and riding styles, I think, won that race.
Yeah. Any interest in Absurd for the Melbourne Cup?
Well, actually, do you know what? I was wondering if you might shed some light on this, either of you, because I watched the Melbourne Cup replay back again yesterday, and Absurd comes into it swinging, hits the front, and then just gets swamped by 6 horses in front of him. Fairly easily, I thought. I wonder whether he saw too much daylight coming around the home turn at a crucial moment, and whether that was the problem. But having watched that, I'd be a little bit concerned about whether he can stick it out over that 2-mile trip, given the strong pace. But maybe he's a slightly improved performer this term, who knows? Yeah. I thought it was a good performance at Chester. Like you, I fancied Keys Chorister. I think maybe that she would have preferred a little bit softer ground in the end, potentially. But that said, he was impressive, and I think he'd be more of a certainty for the Caulfield Cup than the Melbourne Cup.
Interesting.
It is interesting as well, like with that riding style, because in hindsight now, if you look back to how he won the county hurdle, dropped out in rear, this race had plenty of cover. Like, you might be onto something if they ride him a little bit more patiently.
A bit more conservatively, I think, yeah.
25-1 with Bet365 for the Caulfield Cup. Melbourne Cup betting is quite interesting because Vauban's 10-1 favourite. Circle of Fire 12s, Grosvenor Square 12s, Magical Zoe, Evil Winner 14s, Middle Earth 16s, Absurd 20s now.
One thing on the
Delius
Cup.
is in there.
No, the art's for him.
Delius at 25, no interest in
He'll just win the art. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about these handicaps.
When did you put Delius up? It was back
months
in April,
ago.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
April or May, I can't remember. You put Delius up as an art.
Keep the faith with him.
Sticking with it. Any thoughts on that at the moment?
Well, what I was gonna say is just on the Melbourne Cup. Apparently, last year's race was run in like ridiculously hot conditions.
Yes.
Like almost unbearable. And apparently that is one of the kind of less voiced excuses as to why Vauban didn't perform to his best.
Yes,
so that's worth keeping in mind. It was apparently like tropical, which, to be honest, I know it's silly to say this, but I always think of it, how would I have coped in that? And, having been in England and Ireland, I'd have been all over the place. Yeah. So if it's the horses are the same.
I think Ruby Walsh, who obviously travelled down with Vauban, said that he thought the horse suffered from heat stroke. Without knowing definitively, he felt that the horse showed symptoms of heat stroke on that occasion. Would he entice you, Vauban?
Slightly. I'm intrigued how positive everyone was around his chances. And then the fact that he was over there for a while, and I think he did this blistering piece of work 10 days beforehand, and they just think that kind of might have bottomed him before he then went to the race. And I think he's going to go out later this year to try and obviously emulate that workout 10 days before, I would imagine. But it's not often that Willie Mullins gets this wrong when he's so bullish about the chances of this horse.
Absolutely. He's still very keen. And
definitely the way that he's been campaigned this year has been for the Melbourne Cup.
I was just about to say.
The first 3 races, he was really disappointing in.
Everything seems to be geared around getting him right for the Melbourne Cup.
It would make you chuckle as well, actually, and I know this sounds a bit macabre, but all the kind of Shrewdies were on at 66s and 50s last year. Yeah. He didn't win it then. Imagine if he won this year. He couldn't get 10s.
Excellent. There are lots of other good races to look back on from the last week or so. As our guest, Tom, you can open the batting and pick what races struck a chord with you.
Well, the New Sandown Stud Stakes at the Curragh saw Dreamy win again. She's now 2 from 2, having won her debut at Goodwood, stepped up in class to Group 3 company. I think she's a proper filly, this. I think she's really exciting. She still looks so green in that Curragh race. She just looks like she's learning on the job, and yet she's still way too good for Group 3 rivals. So we've got more starts than her. She was the most likely raced filly coming into it. She's got such a lovely long stride. She's over a mile at the moment. Filly's Mile could be on the agenda for her.
14-1 with Bet365.
Yeah.
The Bet365 Filly's Mile.
It's a decent price. Whether or not she goes there, I'm not entirely sure. Next year, though, it's all about her. I mean, she's got stamina in the pedigree. Yeah. A beautiful pedigree. I mean, she's got Tapestry as a dam, and then American Fair as a sire, Galileo mare. I mean, it's all in there, stepping up in trip, and I can't wait to see what she does. I think she's really, really good, and I love her lengthening of the stride inside the final tunnel. We saw it both at Goodwood and at the Curragh. It's almost like she just wakes up and she thinks, oh, this is my job. And she hits the line so strongly, which of course is another reason why I think further will suit in time. But for now, she's she's the apple of my eye, actually, I have to say.
Excellent. Ryan Moore had a very good day on the weekend at the Curragh with 4 winners, I think it was, including quite an incredible ride on Wigmore Street. What was the pick of other action for you?
I really like the performance of Dreamy. She's like the proper Oaks filly in my head. Like, you can have Fairy Godmother and Bedtime Story as your Guineas fillies. They're definitely going to start there, whereas Dreamy's kind of, I just imagine she's just going to progress through the whole season and will be their kind of middle distance filly as a 3-year-old. Ides of March was interesting in the Round Tower Stakes because I looked at it and I hadn't really clocked his form previously, and I saw 2 to 5 for a horse that's only won 1 of his 3 starts so far. I thought it looked a bit short, and then looked back and he obviously had finished behind the Lion in Winter, so his maiden form was actually quite strong, but he's quite good, and he's going to head to the Middle Park, I think, next. He's around 12 to 1 with Bet365 for that. Flying Frontier I thought was good in the handicap. He's now 20 to 1 with the Bet365. Cambridgeshire going to be his next target. The slight drop in trip from 1 mile and 2 to 1 mile and 1 might be a slight question mark though, because he was doing all of his best work at the finish. I'd highlighted on the show last week the Fillies Maiden. Flight ended up winning it. It was a weaker renewal than what I actually thought it was at entries. You had Ballet Slippers and a couple of others that didn't end up getting declared. But yeah, Flight won that by 4 lengths off to the Mayhill next, and she looks a nice filly for Ollie Sangster. And then I'll leave John Quill for you. But
that was John Quill, obviously. Well, for me, the pick of last week's action. Disregarding the fact he's trained by Sir Michael Stout, and I love anything trained by Sir Michael Stout. I thought it was a very impressive performance from a 2-year-old first time out, because he got bullied out of his position a furlong and a half out, and then Ryan Moore had to switch round horses, and at no point did he pick up his stick. And it was just hands and heels, which obviously we know that's the way Sir Michael Stout likes his 2-year-olds to be introduced, with a nice performance. Yet, when he changed his legs and he picked up, there was something spectacular in that moment that suggested he was above average anyway. And there was a lot of chat about a few others in the race. I think the third horse you mentioned it when I first saw you today. Tycoon had been well touted as a horse from the Gosden stable. He stayed on nicely and was eye-catching. But John Quill's pedigree, given the fact that he's obviously related to Kind and comes from the Frankel family. Sir Michael's trained the dam, trained another sibling, knows the family inside out. He's 25 to 1 for the Guineas. Just the perfect introduction. I mean, let's hope he's a bit more reliable physically than poor old Nostrum, who we may talk about again later on. Obviously, Nostrum made that impressive debut at Sandown as well. A couple of years ago, certainly got me excited. But he certainly was exciting. He wasn't the only 2-year-old, by the way, that excited me. The other one was King of Cities, who won at Chester. I don't know if anyone saw that. He won the opening race at Chester on Saturday. He's got gorgeous pedigree. Obviously, he's a half-brother to Inishirin. Unlike Inishirin, who's by Shamadal, he's by Dubawi. But I don't think Chester really suited him either. He showed promise first time up. But yeah, he picked up really nicely. He's got obviously some good entries at the back end of the season. Not sure where he's going to go, but I thought he was a nice 2-year-old. But John Quill, yep, I think we're talking about, well, hopefully he's a star. I mean, you just don't know, do you? I mean, but he's got the pedigree, and I just want Sir Michael to have a really big star, really, really big star before the end of his training career, and I hope that this might be it.
But he could be. I mean, he could be, absolutely. The way he did it was great.
It was the change of legs.
It was not getting a clear run, then getting out when you get that passage through, and then he just sprinted. And I know that Steve and I were saying earlier, and Steve, you mentioned it, you said that he reminded you of Kingman. He was surprised that he's not a Kingman. And I agree, he had that explosive turn of foot in the style of Kingman. Yeah,
it's amazing. You look at a horse, and I just saw the Sussex Stakes in the back of my head. I'd love to see them side by side, but yeah, you click into a pedigree and going, well, this will be by Kingman. Oh, it's not, because it is that head carriage which is slightly higher, the changing of the legs, taking a little while to get organised, which you're completely entitled to do on debut. But yeah, I was blown away by it.
I did want to mention as well, just before you move on.
Yeah.
Tycoon, who finished third in that race, I think he's going to be very, very good in the future. Sorry to bring up sectionals again.
Oh, no, please.
But he actually had the fastest final furlong sectional, faster than Jonquil, which I was surprised by, considering the turn of foot that Jonquil showed. Jonquil dipped below 12 seconds, 11.99. Tycoon, 11.94, and his finishing speed was a little bit higher as well. So there's a lot to like about him, and he wasn't really asked for his efforts until quite late in the piece too. I like him a lot. And John Gosden, Thady Gosden, they did say, sort of, I'd say June, July time, that their 2-year-olds back end of the season are worth keeping an eye on. Like, keep your patience, because they've got some nice ones in waiting. We've seen that recently. We've seen Field of Gold. We've also seen a horse called Detain, who won at Kempton on Weather recently on debut. Very impressive. If you get a chance, do watch that back. And Tycoon, I think, is going to be pretty smart too. And I think they've got a few more to come. So
yeah,
we've got some more weather form coming. Perfect trial for the Guineas.
Well, you know what they say, you can't win a classic unless you run on the all-weather nowadays.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
I mean, that's pretty standard now, isn't it? I mean, because the all-weather only came into being about a week ago. Sorry, we had
I've started him again.
Yeah.
It was just the early part of the season, everyone was going about, and how this ran on the all-weather. Well, horses have been running on the all weather for ages and winning good races.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was
I'm
a bit.
with you.
Yeah. Any more from last week?
No, I'm all good.
Covered everything. Yeah.
That's so unfair. I just poked the bear and all of a sudden I was off and running. Okay, that has been this week's racing recap. Before we get into our weekend preview, just to let you know that our sponsor, Bet365, have a best odds guaranteed offer. It's available on every single UK and Irish race from 8 a.m. on the day of the race. If you take a price and the SP is bigger, Bet365 will pay you at the bigger odds. Full T's and C's can be found on the website. And now it's time to look ahead to this weekend's action. And of course, the big race takes place at Haydock. It is the Sprint Cup. There's some very smart 3-year-olds in there. At the moment, the field looks terrific. There are a number of talented horses that could line up for the race. Personally, it looks like Inisherin versus Elite Status, but there might be 1 or 2 other 3-year-olds in the race that you want to include. Inisherin 7-2 favourite with Bet365 at the moment. Elite Status 6-1. Swing Along 8-1. No confidence yet as to who Clifford Lee is going to ride, whether it be Elite Status or Swing Along. 10-1 Jasseur, Lake Forest 10-1, Kinross is 12s, Bucanera Fuerte 14s, Montesib 14s, 16-1 Anaf. Give me the Beat Boys, Kind of Blue, and Should Have Been a Ring. Spycatcher's also the same price. Where do you want to start here?
I think we should start with the likely going, actually, because obviously in the past we've seen Haydock inundated with rain in this race on many occasions. It doesn't look like it's going to be that, though.
It says good to soft at the moment.
Yeah, and I think they're due very little rain now, which I was really annoyed by, because I was looking at this race thinking there's got to be an angle here with Montesib, who I've been a huge fan of for ages. Yeah. And although he's not kind of got Group 1 form yet, soft ground is what he wants, and he really wants it. And I think he's very smart in soft ground, but at the moment, it looks as though the going is going to be good, I would say, probably come the day. I think they're due 2 or 3 mils before Saturday. But it's a surprise to me because last week I think they were talking about plenty more than that. So with that in mind, you're probably looking at top 2 in the market as the ones to be on it, in my opinion at least. I'd be more worried about Inisherin after that performance in the July Cup. I know it was only 3 weeks after Ascot, which is very impressive in, and these sprinters can take some time to get over their efforts, but that would linger in my mind about him being disappointing in his first run against the older horses. Obviously taking them on again now. I'd rather be with Elite Status. I was at Sandown when he won the National Stakes as a 2-year-old before he then went to the Norfolk, and I fancied the pants off him. I thought he was going to be, he was a certainty, and he didn't win. I've been delighted to see his resurgence and revitalise really this year. I thought he was quite impressive last time out in the Hackwood, and this is his real opportunity now, stepped up to Group Common Company. So I think if I was going to choose between the top 2, it would be Elite Status. But you can't discount Swing Along, can you? Because of course he's got those brilliant 2 runner-up efforts so far this season. Okay,
but Elite Status, principal pick.
Principal pick in the race, if the ground's going to be on the good side. Montesib, if there's any soft in it, but I don't think there will be.
Yeah, I'll give you that on Montesib. I looked at the ground last night, and there was supposed to be a bit of rain on Monday, some on Wednesday, but primarily dry, which, especially over 6 furlongs, just hold back, I think, on Montesib on that ground. Would you, because I know, by the way, I'm pretty certain you'd get support for Elite Status from my man here.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there are bigger fans of Elite Status anywhere, not even Sheikh Obaid. I know Sheikh Obaid, he might want to take everything away, but he won't take away the #1 status for Elite Status from you, would it?
No, and I think looking back at the Norfolk, like he's just not a 5 furlong horse. Like his run last time in a Hackwood, which was a really strong Hackwood, like that shouldn't have been a Group 3. There was a really strong field. With Lake Forest and Kind of Blue in. It made me think that actually a step up to 7 furlongs wouldn't be a mile off this horse, because he stayed on really strongly at the finish. He's pushed along around sort of halfway. And yeah, I do obviously like him for this race. I'm really intrigued with Swing Along though, because if you look at her form, she finished 4th in this race last season when completely isolated. She was drawn 18, so they came down this near side and everything else went far side. And then I watched back that race last night, and it then hit me how disappointing Shaquille was. And I don't want to bring the similarity between Shaquille and Inisherin, but it was one of those performances where you go, oh, this is going to be your 6th run of the season. Have you kind of just gone through and slightly over the top with your 3-year-old campaign? And yeah, I'd be against Inisherin purely with that kind of stuck into the back of my head. But Swing Along, I just think is the rock solid one. She finished 4th in the champion sprint last season on soft ground. We obviously now don't think that it's going to head to soft. It's more likely to be good. But then her 2 latest runs this season, half a length off Carden at Royal Ascot, a neck in second in the July Cup. Like she is rock solid. And Clifford Lee is going to have a proper decision to make.
Who would you ride?
I'd obviously ride Elite Status.
Okay.
Who would you ride?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't ride either one of them.
Purely.
No, I go with what Steve says about Elite Status and the way he won the Hagwood. When I first watched that race, on the day, I thought, oh, Lake Forest was finishing strongly. Obviously, Lake Forest has that tendency to finish right. But I watched it back a couple of times since. In fact, I watched it again last night, and Elite Status, right at the end of the race, it looks like he's gathering himself again to go again. And I think if Lake Forest had been closer to him and got to him sooner, it wouldn't have been as straightforward as it first looked at the time.
I think if you ask me what's going to happen, I think Clifford Lee is going to ride Elite Status with Sheikh Mohammed Obeid moving all his horses to Carl Burke. I think he's definitely going to want to ride him. As a result, right now, I would back Elite Status at 6-1 with Bet365, and I'd wait to back Swing Along each way because I think the market will overreact to the fact that Clifford Lee is going to choose Elite Status. And I think you might even get some double figures around on Swing Along.
That's a very fair point. Inisherin, I think, on what we've seen all season long, if he was the horse that he was going into the Commonwealth Cup, I'd be confident that he could win this race. But you're right. The run at Newmarket is just too worrying. And he had a hard race in the Guineas. He followed that up by winning at Sandown, by Haydock, and then obviously going on to Ascot. So he had a hard spell in the early part of the season. Hopefully he can come back from that. The one horse that I'm keen to see run with a bit of cut in the ground is Kind of Blue. That's the horse I think could potentially go beyond where he's achieved. He's a young horse. I think we mentioned him earlier in the season after he'd won at Doncaster. I think you might have put him up each way for the Commonwealth Cup when he ran a cracking race. If you go through that pedigree, obviously he's related to the Tin Man, who won the Sprint Cup on heavy ground, and his dam I think is related to sister to the Tin Man's dam, and so he's very closely related to the Tin Man. And his last 4 runs have all come with the description firm in the going description. So, and he's run really well. You watch him travel through his races. I just would like to see him on softer ground just to see whether or not there's a bit more in the tank, because I feel that there is. And with James Fanshawe, you know that he's always going to try and, with his patient approach, eke it out, build the horses up through a season, through a career. And I expect him to be better in time. I was hoping, like you, for a bit of juice in the ground, because I thought he would represent a bit of value. But if it's going to be dry, I think he can still run well. So he would be the horse that I'll be keeping an eye on all week long. And if it's good ground, I'd still give him a chance of finding more. But he wasn't that far behind. And again, in that race at Newbury, he travelled as well as anything in the race. I think he's better than what we've seen so far. And there's a suspicion that he could be at his best on soft ground. So Kind of Blue would be my tentative selection. I was a big fan of Inisherin early part of the season, but that run at Newmarket just puts me under a little bit of doubt, or puts him under a bit of doubt for me. So that's the Sprint Cup. We'll look at the Superior Mile, which is the opening race on Saturday at Haydock. Mal Juma is a 6-4 favourite at the moment with Bet365. Al Musmak 9-2. Nostrum 5-1. Regal Reality, Stable Command, don't do that. Oh, where do we go with Nostrum? Boiling Point, New Stable, 10-1. Cicero's Gift, 10-1. Witch Hunter, 10s. 11's Bar. I'll let you open the batting on this one.
So this was relatively lately priced yesterday. So I did all of my kind of prep and priced this in my head, and I had Maljoom odds on for this. So I have to be backing him at 6-4 that's available here. I can understand why connections of him went for the 10 furlong experiment in the Juddmonte, because he has always stayed on strongly over a mile. But just going that half a pace slower over 10 furlongs just meant he was far too keen and just ended up not getting involved. Like, if you go back to his Group 1 runs so far this season, 3rd behind Charon in the Queen Anne, 2nd behind Notable Speech in the Sussex, like, he should easily win this drop down in class to Group 3, and I'm shocked that he's odds against.
I mean, if he hadn't run at York, what price would he be I mean, he'd be very short on the back of that run behind Notable Speech. Interestingly enough, for a race of this sort of quality, not one horse in the race comes into it, 12 horses, off the back of a win. And a fair few have a little bit to prove after disappointing runs. Al Muzmak was disappointing last time. Obviously, Maljum went up in trip, so possibly forgiven. Nostrum, question marks about, you know, obviously he's been injured this season. Rigorati is a bit older, Boiling Point switched stables, so there's lots of imponderables to decipher.
There are, yeah, more rescue missions than the Royal Lifeguard I've got to put up with, the old classic. You're absolutely right. There are a few imponderables. I think there are a lot of horses who are looking to bounce back, aren't there? I'm with Steve on this. A bit like Elite Status, I've been a huge Maljum fan ever since he didn't win the St James's Palace, that he should have won as a 3-year-old. Got no on the inside when Caribus won that. But yeah, his form this season so far stacks up extremely strongly, apart from last time in the Jubmonts, and he's a horse who is more than capable of holding his own, at least at Group 3. We've seen that already this season, of course, behind Notable Speech. But William Haggis, I spoke to him at York about Maljum, actually, and he just said to me, he didn't cry, but he was kind of wincing about how talented this horse is, and yet we just haven't seen it really at any time properly. So I think he'd be very, very disappointed if he doesn't win. And if you're looking at a pure official ratings perspective, he is quite a long way clear of most of these. Yeah. So he should be winning this. Yeah, and he should be odds on based on that run. But I'm with the two of you. I think Maljum's the one to beat. But obviously there's the caveat of my old pal Nostrum, who, like Maljum, is clearly very talented, but we haven't seen the best of him. And perhaps a little bit more frail than a few others in the race. So Maljum, the selection for all of us. The Old Borough Cup also at Haydock on the weekend. Big Phil lining up. Epic Poet, who stayed on nicely at the end of the Ebor, is 4-1 favourite. Divine Comedy 92. This is of course with Bet365. A sale for David Simcox 7-1. Dancing in Paris 8s. Grand Alliance 8s. One for the Gutter 8s, and then 10-1 bar those. Oh, go. Well, it's always a cracking race, isn't it? I absolutely love the Old Borough Cup. You've got a few in here who've had really tough seasons so far, and quite recently. You mentioned the Ebor runs of a few of them. Epic Poet being one for the Gutter, and a Mighty Race, a huge price. And I do think it leaves the door and window slightly ajar for a horse who perhaps hasn't had as tough a recent spell. And the one that I've come down on, who actually ticks plenty of my boxes, is A Sale for David Simcock. I was really taken by his win over a 1.5 mile at Ascot. Now, I know the hot favourite that day disappointed, but it was still visually pretty impressive. He's quite lightly raced, and I think the most important thing about him is I think this trip is going to bring out the best in him. I thought he just screams like he wants 1 mile 6+. Over a 1.5 mile, he was very strong at the finish. And he hasn't run since July. Yeah. So he's had a nice time off the track to prepare for this. I think he's going to be off a nice handicap market. He's £7 or £6 higher than his Ascot win, but I think he was very good value for that 4-length victory. And I'd be very keen on him against some horses who've had some tough old times recently. The likes of Epic Poet have been in really hot handicaps all season. But A Sale is the young buck thrusting his way in. Okay, everyone loves a young thrusting buck. And A Sale fits that description. Yeah, he was pretty impressive at Ascot, and David Simcock has been very patient with him, as he often is. So huge potential for improvement. A Sale fan or looking elsewhere? No, but a similar kind of case. I'm looking for a young buck going up in trip, and that would be Walter Hartright. Obviously, this would be a quick turnaround, having only ran Beverley on Saturday. It was Sam Turner's best bet on the show. Obviously finished second, just failed to reel in Quietness, who I thought was given a really good ride that day. But looking all the way through, over a 1.5 miles, he's really strong at the finish. This step up to 1.6 miles should really suit. Like, he's had a fantastic season. Since they put the blinkers on, he's gone up from 60 up to 89. So they've just put him up £2 this morning since the application of blinkers. I don't think he's done with improving just yet, and he's 12-1. But I probably would hold off Anti-Post. The fact that they entered him on Monday means that he's obviously come out of the race well, but just that slight quick turnaround. Okay. I'd hold off, but I'd back him on the day. All right, a couple of young bucks for the young bucks. I'm going to stick with still a young horse, Knightswood, who went up in trip to 2 miles at York, was too keen in the early part of the race. He's run some top races this season, been unlucky, and I think obviously dropping back in trip, hopefully a better pace. And he was also caught a bit wide. Joe Fanning did everything he could to get himself, but he just wasn't having it. Yet he wasn't beaten that far
by some of the horses who he reopposes with. I think he's worth another chance. Obviously, he comes from the Johnston team, so I'm pretty certain he can handle his racing, no matter how tough his season has been. So I'll stick with Knightswood, who I've actually stuck with a fair few times. Irritating.
There is a big one in him, though, at some point.
Oh, he's
Surely
definitely. He's been unlucky a number of times this season. Hopefully, he'll get his day in the sun in the Old Borough Cup. We'll move to Ascot for the Bet365 handicap. There are a host of old pals, including your horse, Wizard of Eye. You keen on Wizard of Eye again on Saturday?
No, he obviously did me a favour in the Victoria Cup, but the fact that he's had a mid-season injury would put me off at the prices.
He's 11-2 favourite.
Yeah, there's a couple in here that I do like. I'd give a shout to Fresh, whose last win was actually in this race 2 years ago, and he's now off a £9 lower mark. But I thought if he was going to win, it would have been last time when he was third behind Northern Express. He's up £2 for that. And the one that I'd be with, viewers of the show will know I'm a fan of this horse, is Rebel Territory. He was really eye-catching, and I thought put in a really good reappearance run at Goodwood a couple of weeks ago. So Goodwood obviously is slightly different. The 7 furlongs there, they get quickly into a corner, and the whole field just came across him. He was slightly awkward out the stalls and just was far too keen in amongst horses. He then did, in fairness, look as if he was going to be the most likely winner 2 furlongs out, but then just faded late on, which he was completely entitled to do. He was off for 470 days before that. But if you look back at where he's been good previously, he's won at Newmarket, straight course, 7 furlongs, Ascot, straight course, 7 furlongs, where he just has that space to be able to find his own rhythm and then go on from there. Jim Crowley, who's always on board, is jocked up nice and early on him. And yeah, I thought 10-1 was perfectly fair around Rebel Territory. Okay,
Rebel Territory in the Bet365 handicap at Ascot on Saturday for Steve. What do you like there, Tom?
I actually agree with Steve in the fact that Rebel Territory is a really interesting horse now that he's had that run behind him, which I thought was very encouraging, has to be said. I'm going to go slightly elsewhere. One of my better chances, I think, of the weekend, and that would be Alto, winner of the Bunbury Cup. And he's a horse who won the Bunbury Cup very easily. 2 starts since then, he's had excuses. So his first start after that, was at Ascot, over this course and distance, and he got no run whatsoever. He was really unlucky. He was just cruising along, waiting for the gap, had to switch, just didn't really come at any point. And maybe the last 50 yards, but the race had already gone. He looked like a well-handicapped horse off his revised mark, even in that race. He's a little bit higher now because he was well in that day, I think £3 more, but I'm more than willing to say that's okay because I think he's an improving handicapper. And then he ran the Racing League last time at Chepstow, and the going was officially good to soft. But they were ploughing. So I tend to think that he just didn't enjoy it. He did win on soft ground a lot earlier in his career, but I think he's a fast ground horse now. All his best forms on a quick surface. Yeah. And judged on that run over course and distance at Ascot 2 starts ago, even though he finished 9th, he was only beaten 2 1/4 lengths with no run. And I think he's a big player.
Okay. Alto, 12-1 with Bet365. I'm going to back a horse who I have loved. He used to be in training with Richard Fahey, but he's gone to David Evans. I think he's had 15 runs for David Evans, and they've all bar one been pretty good. Blue Prince, he's a 3-year-old by Blue Point, as the name would suggest, and he just runs really good races. And I think he's one of those horses that I think he can even be better than he's shown so far already, even though he's quite well exposed for a 3-year-old with all those runs behind him. He's had a bit of bad luck, 1 or 2 occasions. He has run a fair few times. Last time at Goodwood, he ended up right on the stand side rail in the closing stages and didn't seem to get organised till very late in the race. And he finished 3rd, but staying on quite nicely. And although he's crept up in the handicap for his consistency, I still think there's more to come from him. I'm hoping that they just go a decent pace. The faster they go in this race, the better it will suit him. So Blue Prince for me at 9-1 in the Bet365 handicap. We'll have a look at the Lavazza Stakes as well on the weekend at Ascot. French Duke's a 4-1 favourite for the Roger Varian team. Goodwood Odyssey 9-2. City of Delight, who's been on a winning spree for David Menuisier, 5-1. 7-1 Cambu Macduff, who might be dropping into handicap company now. The Reverend, 7-1, Solomon 8s, and 9-1 bar those. Where would you like to go in this race? And is Macduff interesting to you, having run in the Classic Trial earlier in the season?
I wouldn't be going with him necessarily. Do you know what? I think this is an absolute cracker. I always love the Lavazza, though. It's a handicap that really appeals to me. A mile and a half, improving horses. So many of these are in good form. I'm a little bit worried because Hutchins, who was a winner on his last 2 starts for the Rafe Beckett team, has been double entered. He's also entered at Haydock, and I'm really disappointed because I was hoping that he'd be going to the Lavazza because I really fancied him. Yesterday he was favoured for the Lavazza, and now he's 9-1.
Yeah.
So that screams like he's not going, and in fact he is probably going to Haydock, for which he is 4-1 favourites. So that's pretty much my thought was that Hutchins, wherever he goes this weekend, is probably going to take some beating. With that in mind, he would have been my selection. I'm going to have to go with the Reverend, who is really lightly raced. Only had 3 starts so far. Wasn't given the best ride at Hamilton last time, I think it's fair to say. The horse that beat him is pretty good, and he was odds-on favourite to win, but he was put fair and square in his place. But at the same time, it wasn't the greatest performance in the saddle. I think he's nicely handicapped with his 86 mark for William Haggis. He's an improving handicapper. Haggis got a good record in the race. Won it 2 years ago, the Laia Kell, who actually recently ran at Hamilton, I think, on the same card. But yeah, plenty of appeal for the Reverend off what I think is going to be a very lenient handicap mark of 86 going forward. Surely he's a listed group race performer in the making. So yeah, he'd be my pick in a race that's really hard to work out, I think. There are loads of form lines in there. What a horse City of Delight's been winning his last 4. I mean, David Manuisi always said he liked the horse, but he's done amazingly well with it.
He's been terrific so far for David Manuisi. Looks like he's got more to come because he won with a little bit in hand last time as well. What do you fancy here?
Yeah, I looked at the Reverend. My first port of call was William Haggis because he won it in 2021, 2022, and then didn't have a runner last year. So it's obviously a race that he does target. The Reverend, I think he finished second to Thunder Run, didn't he? Then won at York, so that form has been boosted. But I actually wanted to be on the other Haggis runner, Solomon. So this might be one to actually wait for declarations. Now, I'm normally strict with myself at the Shergar Cup, and I'll only back horses with UK jockeys on, like Billy Lockmain on Giraffe this year was kind of it. But I went against myself and I backed Solomon because I just thought he was so well handicapped that day. He had Alberto Sanna on board and it all went wrong after about a furlong. He was far too keen, he was given too much to do, and he was well in that day because he'd won an apprentice handicap at Haydock. So he is up £7 higher here, but I think this race will really suit. If you look at his breeding, he's by Siuni out of the brilliant race mare Ribbons. So he is, yes, definitely bred to be better than a mark of 92. And I thought 8-1 was fairly big around him.
It's almost word for word what I fancied here, genuinely. Because he's also half-brother to Solcombe.
Yeah.
Who, remember, he won that race at York all those years ago and actually has run well in the Melbourne Cup, etc. And exactly that at Ascot in the Shergar Cup, I was hoping for a Solcombe-esque type of ride. Drop out, settle, just sit, let them go a good pace and then pick your way through. But by the time they got into the straight, he sort of almost put his head up in the air and gone, I've had enough here. I'm hoping that he gets a more genuine pace, settles better. Solomon is the one for me.
I don't think Alberto Sanna will be flown in for the ride.
We'll see him back at the Shergar Cup next year. Is there anything else for the weekend that you want to mention or coming up this week before, obviously, your best bets later on? But is there anything else you want to drop in?
I mean, I was going to mention Hutchins again at Haydock. I think the reason I'm so keen on this horse...
You know, there's an obvious joke here. You are mentioning Hutchins with In Excess. Thank you.
Very good. That was actually excellent. Yeah, but look, I was stood in the Newmarket July Course parade ring watching Hutchins win at Newbury last time, and I was alongside Steve Mellish, actually, our colleague, obviously a very learned and esteemed gentleman.
Yes.
And he was saying to me, there's not a chance that Hutchins is going to, because he was favourite that day, not a chance he's going to win from there because he missed the break and he was ridden along almost the entire way. And then Steve said, "Oh, hang on." Here we go. And he was coming, and Ross O'Ryan gave him a fantastic ride to get him on the line.
You saying Steve Mellish can't read a race?
I would never dream of saying something like that. Slander. But yeah, he didn't look likely, is what I'm trying to say. And then he got up on the line. Obviously, I hope that he go to Lavazza because I think Ascot stiff mile and a half would really suit him. That said, a mile 6 at Haydock, I'm sure will be fine for him. And the extra weight he's got on his back should be negated by the fact that he's unexposed over that trip. Yeah. So yeah, he'd be my other kind of big play of the weekend.
Okay. Anything else that you want to mention?
No, I did just look at the September Stakes. It's not a bad renewal. Hamish caught my eye. He beat Huckham in this race in 2021.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was hoping for bigger than the 11-4 that was available. So yeah, probably just a race to have a look at.
Yeah, Hamish, I thought was interesting. Is he definitely running there, or is he?
No, but obviously with the ground, like it's been a lot firmer, hasn't it, than most years around this time. So that I think they've just kind of given up on the fact of turf, given his disappointing run at Newmarket last time.
Okay. Any thoughts on the Moulin? Anybody thought notable speech would confirm his superiority over his peers, or maybe, or who knows, how he might go against the older horses on the weekend?
Cool.
Well, I don't think he'll be beaten again, personally.
Ever?
Unless you get something that comes out of the woodwork at very high level.
Why? What's the thinking there?
I don't want to say the word sectionals again.
It's okay. You've mentioned it enough times.
I
So
have.
you don't
Yes,
have to
I
mention
have.
it again.
His sectionals that he produced on the weather at Kempton when he won were remarkable, and they were backed up in the Guineas. His time figures in basically when he makes his challenging races and shows that turn of foot, his time figures are extraordinary, and he showed that again in the Sussex. Interesting, I thought that Charlie Appleby came out and said after the Sussex about the St James's Palace that he just wasn't quite right before the race, and he wasn't surprised that he didn't perform at all. That's his only blip so far in what's been an exemplary career. And yeah, I don't think unless we get a proper star, I don't think we're going to see anything beat notable speech, including Rosalie and myself.
Wow, that's a shame, because I was hoping that they'd race against each other again, but I don't know
I hope they
whether-
do, but I'd expect notable speech to win.
Okay. Notable speech, you hold him in the same regard?
I was thrilled to see him back because crossing the line at Ascot, you went, I don't think you're quite right physically here. And then when it came out, oh no, we can't find anything, you kind of went, oh, God, not really sure what to think of the horse anymore. But yeah, I was delighted the fact that he won the Sussex.
Okay. And any thoughts on the St Ledger? Obviously, Hayden O'Brien's got a stranglehold on the race. Illinois 6-4. Illinois. I've heard some people,
I heard
some
that as
people
well.
have called it Illinois. Wow. Jan Bruegel 130. Grosvenor Square 5s. Ancient Wisdom 6-1. Sunway 7s. Looks a good race if those 5 turn up.
It does, and as you say, Aidan O'Brien's got a proper stranglehold on it. I mean, I don't think Los Angeles is going to run it, so it'll be Illinois and Jan Bruegel probably. Of the two, I'd be keener on Illinois. Just because he's always, to me, a proper staying, stamina-laden type, and I thought that he showed that in the Great Voltigeur. And he'd be the one for me. I think Sunway's got a chance, for sure. Looked to stay in the making, didn't he, in the Irish Derby, staying all the time for second. And I think he's definitely got class to him, perhaps more class than, say, an Illinois might have. He just looks a bit of a grinder.
Yeah.
The other one to talk about is Grosvenor Square, who's really found his mojo, hasn't he, recently? I mean,
Go off at 100 miles an hour.
Goes off 100 miles an hour. I think it'd be trickier to do that at Donny than it is at the Curragh.
Yeah.
That said, if he does go ahead by 10 lengths, he'd take some catching.
All right. Any thoughts on the Ledger at this stage?
I'm really strong on Illinois. I went through this race last night. I've put up Illinois this morning for oddschecker. If you look back, he's got the identical profile to Kew Gardens from 2018. He won the Queen's Vase, he dropped back in trip, finished third in a Great Voltigeur, and now goes back up in trip. The fact that Grosvenor Square's in this will make it a proper test of stamina. And yeah, I thought Illinois. The fact that they're sending Wayne Lorden over on the same weekend as the Irish Champion Stakes, who obviously rode him in the Great Voltigeur, I think kind of says a lot.
Yeah.
I did like Jan Bruegel previously, but I think Ryan Moore's really important on him. I thought he was brilliant on him the second start and at Goodwood. And the fact that he's not going to be on board would be a negative for me. And I thought, 6-4 was perfectly justified.
Okay. No view for me at this stage, certainly. I also wait for the ground to see what it's going to be like for the Ledger. But that's a look at what's coming up this weekend. Now, before we get into our best bets of the weekend, just to let you know of a free-to-play 6 horses challenge. It's available every weekend with prize pools available for 5 and 4 correct predictions, as well as a jackpot for all 6. T's and C's apply. So it's time for our best bets of the weekend. Tom Bull is our guest, so he will go first.
Thanks, Rishi. I'm going to go with It Ain't 2. She's got 2 entries this week. One is in the Dick Pool on Thursday, and one is in the Solario Stakes on Saturday. Either race, she is worth getting involved with. She was so impressive at Chester last weekend. The conditions of the race were against her completely. She was wrong at the weights, and she was still really an easy winner. She's got electric pace from the gate. She showed that at Chester. This is why I hope she'll go to Kempton rather than Salisbury, I don't think Salisbury is going to suit her running style quite as much. I think it can be quite difficult for speedy horses to last out over the 6 at Salisbury if you go from the front. Kempton, the Cyrenia, if she goes there, she's definitely worth a look.
Okay, so it ain't 2, possibly at Kempton. On the weekend for Tom Bull. Steve?
I've already mentioned mine. Mine's in the Bet365 handicap, the 135 at Ascot, and it's Rebel territory. I thought his comeback at Goodwood was brilliant in a race that didn't suit going round a bend. He was far too keen after 470 days off the track. Returned to 7 furlongs on a straight course, I thought would really suit him. If you just go back and watch his Victoria Cup victory from a couple of years ago, he won it by 4 lengths. The form is working out well. Jim Crowley's jocked up 10-1. Seems perfectly fair for me.
Okay, it ain't 2 for Tom. Rebel territory for Steve, and I'm going for Rogue Encore, who runs on Saturday at Haydock in the last race. He's got a couple of entries this weekend, one at York on Sunday, I think, and one at Haydock. I think he's going to Haydock. Earlier in the season, on the all-weather, he finished 3rd behind Inishirin and Kalpana. Obviously, Inishirin went on to win a Group 1, favourite for the Sprint Cup at Haydock. Kalpana, very talented, pattern filly. And even the horse that finished in 4th on that occasion, behind Rogue Encore, First Alliance, is rated 81. Rogue Encore still rated 78. And anybody who watched the race at Newbury last time out, where Rab Havlin, not one of Rab's greatest days in the saddle, and even he was apologising after the race because it was just a shambles, stuck in behind a wall of horses, couldn't go anywhere, didn't go anywhere. So he runs off 78. He will sweat up before the race, but that is just him. So if his price does drift because he's sweating, I would be too concerned by that. I've had a look through the race at Haydock on Saturday. There is nothing in there with his potential. I think he's very well handicapped. So fingers crossed for a clear run. I'm not sure who's going to ride, but Rogue Encore on Saturday in the last race at Haydock. Okay, and that is just about it. Hopefully we've nailed the patent or treble or whatever it is you want to do. 882 Rebel Territory and Rogue Encore on the weekend. Final thoughts, Tom. If you have one thing to happen for the rest of the season in terms of top-class racing, what would it be? Would it be what you started off chatting about, City of Troy winning the Classic, or would it be something else?
I think that would be up there, for sure. I'd like to see Notable Speech Rizalian rematch, because just to say, crow everyone that Notable Speech, yeah, Notable Speech is better.
I'd like to say it for the complete opposite reason.
Yeah. One race I'm really looking forward to, we didn't mention it actually, is the Flying Five at the Curragh on Irish Champions Weekend, just very briefly, because it's looking like it's going to be a rematch between Bradsell and Believing. Believing back at the scene of her Sapphire Stakes victory, taking on Bradsell. I think it's going to be an absolute belter of a race. They're not going to the Sprint Cup with her. I thought it was really interesting. They're keeping her fresh for that. I think she'll turn the tables. But that is one of, 2 or 3 clashes I can't wait for.
Excellent. The Flying Five on Irish Champions Weekend. And Steve, normally in this part of the conversation, you always tell us about heading off to a racecourse, that maybe one that you haven't been before. Any plans this weekend?
Not this weekend, no.
Well, you got something in the pipeline?
No.
Oh.
No.
That's like a no yes, isn't it?
I'll let you know next week.
Oh, tune in. I see what you're doing there. All right, well, that is it for this week's episode of Racing Weekly, brought to you by oddschecker in association with Bet365. Thank you very much to our special guest, Tom Bull, and, of course, my old pal, Steve Ryder, for joining me on the show this weekend. As always, if you'd like what you've heard or watched in this or any of our previous episodes, then please leave us a kind review on Apple Podcasts or in the comments section on YouTube. We are back next week to have a look ahead to the Irish Champions Weekend and, of course, the final classic of the season, the St. Leger. But for now, from all of us here, bye-bye.